to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we will now have general public comment, which is limited to 2 minutes. Do we have any general public comment? We have someone in the room. Mr. Sign, can you please read the rules?
Certainly. All speakers should sign into the room at the sheet available in the back of the room. Speakers should come to the podium if they are physically able. Speakers should identify themselves by name and municipality. All public comments must be relevant or germane to county election board business. Under the law, this means that the subject matter of all comments must be limited to issues or items which may become before the election board for consideration or which may come before the election board for consideration at a future meeting. Whether a matter is germane to county election board business is a determination to be made by the county solicitor. Profane, slanderous, or discriminatory language or comments will not be tolerated in accordance with the county's non-discrimination policy. A time limit of 2 minutes will be monitored, and county staff will respectfully request speakers to conclude their comments if the speaker goes beyond the time allotted. The election board is not required to respond to public comments during the course of the meeting, so the public is reminded that this is not an opportunity for dialogue and questions and answers. The board chair may direct appropriate county staff to follow up on any questions or additional comments after the meeting. Disruptive behavior, including but not limited to yelling from the seats, arguing whether matters germane to county business once solicitors made a determination on such, or otherwise attempting to disrupt the meeting in any way, or refusing to yield the floor once time has elapsed and being requested to sit down, shall be grounds for removal or muting from the meeting without further admonishment or warning. And as always, the commissioners welcome written correspondence, comments, and feedbacks at commissioners@montgopa.org.
All right, thank you, Mr. Stein. Sir?
My name is Francis Riccuti. My home address is 4638 Logan Court. At Schwenksville mailing address, Skipback Township. I don't know what division or ward I'm in. I have a problem. I wrote a letter to Kenneth Lawrence, Joseph C. Gale, and Valerie Arcouche on October the 20th. That's almost a month ago, 3.5 weeks, to which I have not received a response. Is there a reason? That's my public comment. Is there a reason why I can't get a response to my letter?
Sir, I can't say that I've seen your letter, but if you want to resend it or leave it with us here, that's fine.
You know, I think this is outrageous. I wrote to all 3 members of the board. Is somebody telling me that nobody read their mail? Is that what we're being told? That's all I want to know.
Okay. Do you have any other comments, sir?
Yes. In the spring, I had a little situation where I filed an application for an absentee ballot. I specifically put the address as to where it should be sent. Notwithstanding that, it was sent to my home, then returned to the election board, and therefore I missed voting. It was the first time in 60 years that I've missed my opportunity to vote. I was completely disenfranchised because of inefficiency in the election board and their operation and the so-called mail-in ballot, absentee ballot, inability to send it out. I had to request through a right to know to get my application that I filed to see, just to make sure what your records indicated. I was told that this is a public record. I don't think so. I thought that that was my application that I filed. It was not a public record per se. It could have been returned to me, a copy, to confirm that, in fact, I did what I was supposed to. I guess that's the 2 minutes?
That is your 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, I'll be back.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other public comment? All right, do we have any comment on items on the agenda? Also limited to 2 minutes. All right, any board comment? All right, moving along. This is a hearing to consider challenges to provisional ballots cast in the November 2nd, 2021 general election. Pursuant to the Pennsylvania Election Code, the board is required to convene a hearing to consider all challenges to the decision of the canvass board on provisional ballots. 28 ballots were challenged during the canvass, and we will hear arguments regarding those challenges this morning. County Solicitor Joshua Stein will read the procedures to be followed for today's hearing into the record. The board will consider challenges by subject of the challenge in the following order: failure to indicate a reason for issuing the ballot, failure to provide an accurate date in the voter signature section of the ballot, voters were contacted to cure their ballots, voters who did not fully complete the voter signature section, voters who did not fully complete the voter affidavit, and ballots where a voter signature exists in the poll book. And Mr. Stein, will you please read the rules for the hearing?
Certainly. At the direction of the Election Board Chair, challengers will present the basis for their challenges, any evidence and witnesses, and answer any questions asked by the Election Board. Election Board Counsel may ask questions of any presented witnesses. The Election Board Counsel will present evidence and witnesses, and the challenger may then ask questions of any witnesses presented. The Election Board shall not be bound by the Pennsylvania Rules of Evidence. All testimony presented will be stenographically recorded and made part of the record of the hearing. Any objections raised by either party will be considered by the board chair, who may seek comment or input from other board members and the county solicitor in making decisions to sustain or overrule an objection. When possible, all challenges related to the same or similar issues will be consolidated and heard by the Election Board together. All challenges shall be made pursuant to the Election Code. The Election Board will not consider objections to the procedures for issuing provisional ballots outlined in the Pennsylvania Election Code. The Election Board will not consider challenges not raised at the time challenges were to be made during review of provisional ballots by watchers. The Election Board will not consider any challenges outside of those pertaining directly to the initial decision to grant full, partial, or no credit to those ballots. The Board reserves the right to preliminarily dismiss any challenges to the Board that it does not deem to be valid permissible challenges. After the parties have had a fair opportunity to be heard on each challenge, the Election Board shall vote on a decision to uphold or dismiss the challenges. The Election Board Chair will state all decisions on the record, and the decisions will not be reduced to writing. Any party aggrieved by any decision of the Election Board may file a petition with the Court of Common Pleas seeking review of the decision within 2 days after the decision has been made. Any appeal brought to the Court of Common Pleas from the decision of the Election Board must set forth the objections to the Election Board's decision along with a request for an order reversing said decision.
All right, thank you, Mr. Stein. Before we get started with the challenges, do we have any agreements to withdraw any challenges?
Yes, Mr. Lawrence. I've had conversations with counsel for representatives at the canvass for the Democratic watchers. They had originally raised 10 of the 28 challenges that were before the board. In conversations with Mr. Tim Ford, their counsel, he has indicated to me that they have agreed to withdraw all of their challenges prior to today's hearing. If Mr. Ford wants to affirm that for the record, I'd appreciate it.
Good morning, Commissioners. Happy to affirm that we are withdrawing the 10 objections we made during the provisional ballot challenge process.
Thank you. We will move on then. And so the first challenge is failure to indicate a reason for issuing the ballot.
Yes, my name is Kurt Alker, Beaver County, Pennsylvania. Last name is Acker, and I'm here with the Republican Party of Pennsylvania. I just wanted to mention that the process for these ballots was certainly fully debated. It was bipartisan. It was passed by a Republican legislature and signed by a Democrat governor. And it's very clear. It's in place to ensure fairness and public trust. And I just think that we should read exactly what the letter of the law is when it comes to these.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Alker.
Thank you.
Mr. Marlett.
So in regards to, I'm sorry, we're in our first set of challenges on a failure to indicate a reason. So in regards to that, prior to voting a provisional ballot, an eligible elector is required by the code to sign an affidavit, and in the code it says to check the reason for casting the provisional ballot. In the review of provisional ballots, our canvass staff read this requirement in conjunction with section A452 of 3050 of the election code, which lays out a very specific criteria for not counting a provisional ballot. Not providing a reason is not specifically enumerated as grounds for a ballot to not be counted. Moreover, while the code states the voter should check the reason, the outer envelope clearly indicates that section is for election officials only, and that the voter should not complete it themselves. And to the extent any of you do not have a copy of the outer envelope, I can distribute that now for your reference if you would like. Do you need one? Yeah, if you want a bigger one. Now, when you look at that section and reason for a ballot and the indication that it's for election officials only, Pennsylvania courts, when regarding the counting of ballots in elections, have on numerous occasions cited the invalidation of a ballot where the voter has complied with all instructions communicated to them in the absence of any evidence of improper influence having been exerted, that invalidation would necessarily amount to an unreasonable encroachment upon the franchise. In the situation that we're currently looking at, we have these 10 ballots roughly that have been challenged for having no reason included. There's no indication that there's been evidence of any improper influence having been exerted. Moreover, a challenge to this section was previously put before the board. If you'll all remember, we were here exactly 1 year ago today with
Was it exactly 1 year ago?
exactly 1 year ago today, with somewhere between 5,000 and 6,000 total challenges at the start of that hearing. One of the large chunks of those challenges were the challenge to not having a reason listed. And at that meeting, the board considered those ballots and voted that they should be counted. I would ask that based on the specific requirements of the code and the previous board precedent that the board would vote. It's my recommendation that the board should vote to accept these ballots.
I'm going to make a motion that absent any other existing defects that would exclude the ballot from being counted, a failure to indicate the reason for voting provisionally in the reason for ballot section of the outer provincial ballot envelope is not a sufficient defect to exclude the ballot from being counted. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Dr. Orkush. We dealt with this 1 year ago exactly today, which I didn't realize it was 1 year ago. And I believe that we'll hold with that decision. So that's why I'm.
Sorry, Commissioner, I don't mean to interrupt, but I do want to make sure that voters who have been affected by this have an opportunity to have their voices heard. I believe we have one, possibly two voters in the room who were affected by this particular decision. I also have comment that was submitted by a voter on the list, Michael Edelstein, who resides at, pull it up here, 1386 Cherry Lane, and that is in Bluebell. And I'll just read his email into the record if that's acceptable for everyone. He says, "Hello, my name is Michael Edelstein, and I received a call that my ballot was being challenged because the reason wasn't checked off. The reason I had to use the provisional ballot was because I had moved, and although I received my voter card, my name was not in the book." So that's all the comment that we've received via email, and if there's anyone else in the room.
Are there any voters in the room who are impacted by this challenge? Would you like to speak?
My name is Francis Riccuti. I live at 4638 Logan Court, Schwanksville, mailing address, Skipback Township. I voted by provisional ballot. Now, you were handed 20 ballots, but you didn't put any names up there, so we don't know who they are. I don't know if my name is in that 20 or not. How do I find out if I've been approved or not now?
His name is on the list as one of those ballots.
All right.
A vote in favor would.
Well, that ballot is in conjunction with the letter that you have, because I didn't ask for a mail-in ballot, okay? I was here, and I tried to vote, and I don't know. I'd like to know who challenged it.
This is
Am I allowed to find out who challenged it?
This was a challenge that was raised by watchers who were representatives of the Republican Party.
Oh, that's nice. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Well, equal opportunity here. Hopefully, so that means that my ballot will be counted. Is that what I given understanding?
We haven't voted, but.
All right, he's recommending it. I would think that
recommending it. There's a
you got all
motion.
this precedent that you're going to follow here. Hopefully, you'll be able to respond to my letter before I die. Thank you.
Hey, sir, would you like to speak?
Yes, I'm actually my son, so I just.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
All right, is there any other board comment? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to a vote. Are there any negative votes? All right, hearing none, the motion passes, and these ballots will be counted. The next is failure to provide an accurate date in the voter signature section of the ballot. Mr. Walker? And welcome to Montgomery County.
Thank you. Long drive. I would just reiterate that the process isn't very burdensome, and what was laid out in the law should be followed.
Mr. Marlette? Or,
Yeah, I'm going to take this one. The section 3050 that Mr. Martlat referenced previously outlines 6 specific reasons that a provisional ballot will be rejected, and failure to fill in a specific date is not one of those reasons. And in this situation, a date was filled in. It just happened to be the voter's birth date as opposed to the date of the election. We know the date of the election was November 2nd, and it's written on other places on the provisional ballot envelope. This is a situation that is specifically referenced by case law, and that says if you have a minor defect on the outside of the provisional ballot envelope, that vote should still count, because we don't want to disenfranchise a voter for a minor defect on the envelope when we can tell the rest of the information is accurately completed. Most significantly, the affidavit with their signature.
all right, do we have any voter whose ballot is being challenged in this group? Any speak or any comments that want to be submitted? No? All right, I am going to make a motion that absent any other existing defects that would exclude the ballot from being counted, a failure to provide the date of the election on the date line of the voter signature section of the outer provisional ballot envelope is not a sufficient defect warranting the exclusion of such ballots from being counted. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Dr. Arkush. Is there any board comment?
I have a comment, that question. So, Mr. Calder, you mentioned the one ballot that had the birth date instead of the date of the election, but it says that there's 4 ballots under this category?
That's applies to all 4 of those ballots.
Yes, I'm sorry, I misspoke. I meant all of them.
All 4 had a birth date and not
Correct.
the date of the election?
Correct.
But everywhere else on the outer envelope had the election date?
That's correct. It's referenced elsewhere on the outside of the envelope.
There were 2 more sections where the judge of elections and the minority inspector are to sign and date the envelope, and in those sections, the date of the election was listed.
Yeah, and I'll just note as well that we had this issue before us in 2020 as well, and we determined to count at that time, so I believe precedent is important. But any other board comment?
Yeah.
All right, hearing none, we'll move on to a vote. Are there any negative votes? All right, motion passes. The ballots will be counted. Number 4, voters who were contacted to cure their ballots. We have 2 ballots in this section. Mr. Acker?
I will withdraw those challenges. Withdraw the challenges.
Okay. All right, so I just call it withdrawn, Mr. Marlette, and we'll
Yes.
move on to next then? Okay. Next is voters who did not fully complete the voter signature section. We have 2 ballots in that.
This is very clear to ensure the identity of the individual.
All right.
In this situation, the canvassers were able to identify the individual voters despite there being some information that was not printed on the outside of the envelope. And so we are in agreement that that is the reason that you have that requirement so that you can identify the voter. But the canvassers were able to identify, and that, again, is not a specific reason to not count a vote under section 3050.
Do you mind if I
Yeah,
piggyback on that
yeah,
a
go
little
ahead.
bit? I think what we're looking at with both of these ballots is in the number 4 section that requires the voter signature. There are additional sections down there that ask for the voter to print their name as well as to print the date. On both of these challenges, we do have a signature from the voter in the signature section. What remains empty is the area where the voter would print their name or otherwise date the ballot. As we have said prior to this, there are other sections within the outside of the ballot where the date is correctly listed. And on both of these, if you look at voter information in section 1, the very first thing a voter is asked to do there is to print their name. So although it is absent necessarily here from section 4, the printed name of the voter and the date does exist elsewhere on this ballot. Again, this is a situation where we look at this as, you know, a minor mistake of the voter that shouldn't affect the ability for their ballot to be counted, and we'd ask that the board vote in favor of counting these.
So, can you show us where the voters didn't sign?
Do you want, you can put it up on the screen.
So here is our voter signature section, right? This is section 4 where the voter should sign or mark on both of these ballots. I've got a voter signature here. I have a voter signature here. The challenge pertains to the fact that they left the print name and the date sections of this empty. And as you can see, you've got a date here, you have a printed name up here.
So they signed,
They
they just
signed-
didn't print their name.
Yeah, they didn't print their name or enter a
I'll
date.
just take a photo.
Yeah, absolutely. So here, you got the sign name, you got dates here, you have a printed name on here. And then you have a printed name, sign name, dates.
And is it correct that number 4 doesn't happen until after the voter has voted, according to these instructions?
Yes.
So the perception of the voter is they're done. They voted, they signed their name, they're turning it in.
Correct.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to make a motion that absent any other existing defects that would exclude the ballot from being counted, the failure to print the voter's name and/or fill out the date is not a sufficient defect warranting the exclusion of ballots from being counted as such. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Dr. Arkush. Are there any board comments?
I'd just like to ask Mr. Acker, do you have any comment in response to the legal precedence that's already has occurred in the past related to this?
No, not at all. I just wanted to point out that the signatures are a very basic identifier, a legal identifier for any of us, and the legislature required it, and we believe it should that we should stick with it, despite prior precedent.
But Mr. Acker, just to be clear, there is a signature on both of those ballots.
Yes,
Okay.
but not in the correct place where it should be. But I do understand that. Yes.
Well, actually, I think the signature is in the correct place on these 2 ballots. It's just the printed name and date is what is absent. Is that correct, Mr. Mellott?
That is correct.
Yeah, maybe could you just show Mr. Acker, please?
Sorry. These are the 2 that were challenged. We got signatures in the box. They just didn't,
Okay.
They didn't fill out the name or put a date in.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
And if I could,
Okay.
and if I could add, Commissioners, just to put a period on that, this is Tim Ford for the Montgomery County Democratic Committee. As the Solicitor's Office represented to you in precedent in the law, that is not one of the 6 reasons in Section 3050 not to count a ballot. So I just want to make sure the Commissioners have comfort with that.
All right. Is there any other board comment, questions? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to a vote. Are there any negative votes? All right, motion passes. The ballots will be counted. And I believe we are now on number 6. Correct. Okay, thank you, Mr. Stein. Voters who did not fully complete the voter affidavit, Section 2. We have 1 ballot in this.
So,
You want to?
oh yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Mr. Acker.
Just, yes, the exact same thing. The process is very clear. The legislature laid this out so we can ensure fairness and that there's trust in the vote. It's not a burdensome idea to have them fill out an affidavit, and I think failure to do so would make the ballot not count.
When we're referring to, this is in reference to Section 2, the voter affidavit for provisional ballot section. And I would like to, just if I can show everybody what this section currently looks like, so you know what we're looking at. This is the section that's been signed down here.
Okay.
I believe this is.
Oh,
their
that's the same one
precinct.
as- yeah.
Yeah, this is the same as the.
Okay.
This one got challenged for two separate reasons. You can see it. Section 2 right here, you'll see that they filled in this location, which I believe is where they vote. And then the rest of this has been left blank, and they sign their name down
Or
here.
it should have been their home.
Yeah, this should be their registered voting address. Okay? So here we've got the polling location, the rest is blank. It's signed down here.
Okay.
Good? We filled out the first line with their precinct location.
Oh, I see.
The rest is blank. It is signed down here. So when,
Okay, wait, can I
Sorry.
just come
Oh, yeah,
back for a
sorry.
second? So, but their home address is here,
yeah,
and we
Here.
have two signatures,
Yep,
and we have
a printed name.
the birth date, the printed name. Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay.
Let me, but their address is,
Yeah, you were jumping ahead of me just a little bit, so I can cover it here. What I was gonna say is, and while we're at it, although they don't have their registered address filled in as part of the affidavit, in section 3, it asks for your current address where the voter lives. And our Office of Voter Services has been able to determine that the location that they listed here is their registered address. So the registered address does exist in one section of the ballot. It's not necessarily within section 2 of the affidavit, but it is written in section 3.
Is this the same ballot that already counted because it doesn't have the printed name?
Yeah, it's cleared this hurdle over here. Now we got to get it over this one because it was challenged for both of those
So it
reasons.
cleared the first hurdle, but
Yep.
it doesn't clear this one.
Then it would not count. Yeah. So the Department of State's guidance on the affidavit section is that it's to be completed. There's no real specification as to what extent. The code, if you look at it in section A42, in the affidavit requires only a signature, which is what we have. The purpose of this section is for the voter to affirm their ability to vote via the information that they have provided. As I pointed out, the correct information exists elsewhere on this envelope, and if you look at the envelope as a whole, you're able to determine the voter's name, the voter's registered address, and you have the voter's signature. And to that extent, the board is able to identify that voter, verify the voter identity, and if they're able to count that ballot. The current policy of the canvass board is for ballots such as this to be counted. And again, if we're looking at election law, while it's recognized that we should strictly enforce provisions to prevent fraud, we need to be flexible in order to favor the right to vote. This, again, there's no evidence of any kind of fraud. This is just a simple instance of mistake, and we believe that this is an instance where this ballot should be counted.
all right. I'm going to make a motion that absent any other existing defects that would exclude the ballot from being counted, the failure to fill out any or all the address, city, zip code, voter, municipality, and voter county sections is not a sufficient defect warranting the exclusion of such ballots from being counted. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Dr. Arkush. Any board comments? Hearing none, we'll move on to a vote. Are there any negative votes? Motion passes. The ballot will be counted. All right, and final is ballots where a voter signature exists in the poll book. There's one ballot in this area.
That would certainly suggest that they had voted there, and that would be a double vote if they voted in person.
Ms. Merlette?
So, in getting context for the nature of this challenge, I spoke with staff in our voter services office, and we had two instances throughout the provisional count where the board came across, in making their decision, came across a signature that was in the poll book and then the person had voted provisionally. And in the challenge process, the first ballot that was presented to the watchers, the situation was explained fairly clearly. There was a note included with that ballot by the judge of elections. And that's a note after I sort of explained the whole situation. I can read in, so the board has that for the record, but the decision of the canvass board at that point was to count that ballot. The challengers didn't raise a challenge to that particular ballot, but later in the process, when a ballot came up with this, that was in the same situation, with a signature in the poll book, the decision of the canvass board at that point was to not count that ballot. My understanding is that the watchers at that time, in recognition of what they saw as a discrepancy in the policy of the board, raised the challenge for basically for clarity as to what the correct policy should be. So when you go back and look, the code, when giving guidance as to counting ballots of this nature, says that absent any compelling evidence to the contrary, provisional ballots where it's indicated that they should be credited to vote should absolutely be given credit through that process. So what we have here is a situation where in this first ballot, the judge of elections attached a note to the outside of it, and the note reads, the name of the voter was Syed Hussein, and the judge of elections indicated Syed Hussein's father voted in Towamenson 2-2. Both have the same name. The father looked at the name in the book and signed without looking at the address. His father should have voted in Towamenson 3-1 at Walton Farm. The father's birthday is 11/7/38. Address is 419 Candlewood. The son had to fill in a provisional ballot in order to vote. And in reviewing this, what the board did was they went and they checked the poll book for where the father is registered to vote. And I can show this to you. They determined that although the father had voted and signed in his son's name and was issued a ballot, he did not go back and vote a second time under his own name. And you'll see that right there. You've got Syed Hussein at 419 Candlewood. You've got, that's
Is
the
this
poll book.
the ballot that's being challenged, or?
This was the ballot that's accepted. I'm trying to offer a little context as to why
Okay.
one should be accepted and why one shouldn't. So you've got the signature where the father didn't go back. So it's the policy of our board when they can determine that a person who voted provisionally was not I'm sorry, I can show it to you there as well. You got his, and that's his spot without the signature in it.
Okay, this is the
This father, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
And if you'd like to see it, I can show that to you. You got it here. Okay.
Thank you.
So the policy of the board is that they can make a determination that the person who's casting the provisional ballot was not or did not vote, that they are going to count it. In this instance, what the board did was they determined that since they have a note from the judge of elections that indicates that the signature in the poll book for the son's name was actually the father's, and that the father voted that ballot, and that they were able to verify that the father subsequently did not vote a second time, they awarded credit to the son for his provisional ballot so that his vote in turn would also count. That is,
Mr. Marlowe, can I just ask one question?
Absolutely.
Did the signatures not look different? I mean, I would assume if the father signed and the son's signature,
yes.
did those two signatures look different?
I can't speak to the difference in signature and what those had looked like at the time the son had signed the poll book. This is a mistake that happens when you have people in the same family with the exact same name who vote in the same place. I don't know exactly what goes on in any particular polling location. I know they tend to get busy, and it would not surprise me that this is a situation where they saw the name, they told him to sign, he signed. And then later, when the son turned up to vote, he saw that there was a signature there, and they figured out that his father had come in before him and voted in his place. So the ballot that came up later in the review that was actually challenged.
The ballot that we're actually,
Yes.
so.
Sorry. There is a note in the reason for ballot that says son voted under his name, number 129, similar signature. The board in this instance, they came to the decision that this is a ballot that they did not feel there was sufficient evidence otherwise to indicate that this ballot should be counted, so they decided to award this ballot no credit. That is the situation we find ourselves in with these two ballots. We have one that has been accepted for this reason, where there's a very clear listing of who was there, how that person could have been identified, and the ability for them to go and check and make sure. On the second one, I do not know that the board felt they had sufficient information or had the ability to verify that whoever had voted in the place of the voter had not also gone and voted again in their own name, and to prevent the potential of any multiple voting or anything like that, they decided that the vote should not be counted.
I'm going to make a motion that a provisional ballot submitted where there is a recorded signature in the poll book indicating an in-person vote is a sufficient defect warranting the exclusion of such ballots from being counted. Is there a second?
Second.
By Dr. Arkush. Any board comment?
Go ahead.
Go.
Mr. Marlett, do you have a copy of the son's signature that he did on his provisional ballot envelope?
And that's in the first one that we were talking about, or?
Will you show me the father's signature in the poll book?
Well, yeah, the father's signature, where,
I'd like
where
to
it
see
should
the
have been in the poll
son's
book.
signature compared to the father's.
Okay, so this would be, let me find his. I gotta make sure I have the right one. Ooh, okay. So you have, right here is, we gotta turn it around so it's right side up for you. That's the signature in the poll book of the father, for the father. And you got the signature for this on there. And the second one there.
And do we have the date of birth of the son?
The date of birth of the son is 4/5/1980.
The father's 38, right?
1938, correct.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. Any other board comments?
Yeah, I would just like to add that in this instance, it's a case where if there was voter identification requirements, a poll worker could easily identify that the voter who was born in 1980 wasn't a voter in 1938, and this could have been fixed before it got to this position. So just as a way to make an example of this occurring, I'm planning on casting a vote in opposition to this being counted.
Right. That's the motion.
Yes.
Okay. So, any negative votes? Okay. Motion passes. All right. I'd like to make a motion to instruct those members of the canvass board for the reconciliation and examination of provisional ballots for the November 2nd, 2021 election to award appropriate credit to all submitted provisional ballots based on the decisions made by the board at this hearing, and to implement these decisions as canvass board policies and procedures for all future elections. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Dr. Arkush. Any board comment? Hearing none, we'll move on to a vote. Are there any negative votes? No. So for my closing board comment, now that this hearing for challenge ballots is concluded, the appropriate canvass boards will proceed to open and count the 954 provisional ballots approved for full or partial credit. In addition, those approved at today's meeting, along with 55 military and overseas ballots timely received, 215 mail-in or absentee ballots where voters have properly verified their identification, and any of the 646 remaining one-sided ballots that may be counted when it is determined that the voters who returned them did not receive credit for voting by any other method. Any other closing board comments? All right, I will make a motion to adjourn the November 12th, 2021 meeting of the Montgomery County Board of Elections. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Gale. Any board comment? Hearing none, we'll move on to a vote. Are there any negative votes? Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.